Take up the rose, bring it to the altar, put down the rose to the east on the altar. I inhale the perfume of this sacred rose as a symbol of the element of air and liberty. Smell the rose, take up the fire, bring it to the altar, put down the fire to the south on the altar. I feel the warmth of this sacred flame as a symbol of the element of fire and light. Spread your hands over the fire. Take up the cake of light, or bread and salt, bring it to the altar. Put down the cake of light, or bread and salt, to the north on the altar. I eat this sacred cake of light, or sacred bread and salt, as a symbol of the element of earth and life. If you are not using a cake of light, then dip the bread in the salt and eat it. Take up the cup of sacred wine or water. Bring it to the altar. Put down the cup to the west on the altar. And finally, I drink this sacred wine or water, if under 21 years of age, as a symbol of the element of water and love. Make the cross with the cup and drink from it. Drain the cup. It is done. Replace the cup to the west on the altar. Knock and say cabs. Knock and say Knock and say pecht. Knock and say conks. Knock and say Knock and say pax. Knock and say light. Knock and say in. Knock and say extension. The closing. Go to the center of the temple, knock 353 on the altar, and say, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Go to the east of the temple. Take up the cup of lustral water for purification. Hold it up toward the east and say, "So therefore first, the initiate who governeth the works of fire must sprinkle with the lustral waters of the resounding sea." Make a cross in the air with the cup and sprinkle a few drops of water 3 times toward the east. Pass to the south, west, and north, repeating the purification in each quarter, then return to the east and say, "I purify the temple with water." Take up the censer of incense for consecration, hold it up toward the east and say, "And when all the phantoms have vanished, thou shalt see the holy and formless fire, that fire which darts and flashes through the hidden depths of the universe." Make a cross in the air with the censer and swing it thrice toward the east. Pass to the south, west, and north, repeating the censing at each quarter. Then return to the east and say, "I consecrate the temple with fire." Circumambulate 3 times counterclockwise, giving the sign of Horus when passing the east, so as to project the force that radiates therefrom. Begin and end in the southeast, and then say, "The mystic reverse circumambulation is accomplished. It is the symbol of the fading light." Go to the center of the temple, face east, give the sign of Horus, and say, "Unity uttermost showed, I adore the might of thy breath. Supreme and terrible God, who makest the gods and death to tremble before thee, I adore thee. Appear on the throne of Ra, open the ways of the Ku, lighten the ways of the Ka, the ways of the cabs run through, to stir me or still me, let it fill me. Return in the sign of silence. Knock and say cabs. Knock and say knock and say pecht. Knock and say conks. Knock and say knock and say pax. Knock and say light. Knock and say in. Knock and say extension. In the name of the crowned and conquering Lord of the universe, I declare that the temple is duly closed. May what I have partaken maintain me in my search for the quintessence, the stone of the philosophers, the summum bonum, true wisdom, and perfect happiness. Knock 353 on the altar and say, love is the law, a love under will. Abrahadabra. Make the signs of the neophyte toward the east of the temple and depart from the temple in the sign of silence. Yea, depart from the temple in the sign of silence. Love is the law, love under will. Happy autumnal equinox 2024 to anybody who actually watches this. And by all means, check us out at praemonstro.com, praemonstro.com. And on Facebook, the page is Practitioners of TGD.